Come with me as we take photos in the snow. It has just snowed here in Germany, so we're going to take my two dogs Loki and Journey out into the woods to get some photos in the snow, and I'm going to share with you my favorite tips and tricks for taking great pet photos in the snow. Let's go. So my first tip for taking photos in the snow is obviously to find yourself a nice location. Once you've found that location, as you're putting in your camera settings, it's important to keep an eye on your histogram. That's a little graph that you can see in a lot of camera screens that show you how light or dark your camera is. This is obviously assuming you're taking the photo with the camera in manual mode so that you have some control over the settings, which I highly recommend. In this case, what we need to be doing is making sure that we are exposing the photo for the highlights, aka the brightness of the snow. If we make our photos too bright, the snow is just going to end up as a textureless white blob with no detail, no texture, just pure, look, he's having a great time in the background, pure white and nothing else. So as you're dialing in the settings, keep an eye on the histogram. I'm going to show you in a minute what it looks like. This is especially important if you're taking photos in a situation where there is any kind of light shining on the snow, like sunlight. In this case today, it's very gray, it's very overcast. We don't have a lot of light bouncing around anywhere, but we're definitely still going to want to keep an eye on that histogram to make sure that we're not blowing out the highlights. Let's jump over here to this location because this looks quite pretty and dial in those settings, and I'll show you how the histogram looks with the snow. So as you can see, I've got Journey posed just here. And if you have a look at the histogram, you can see that there is a spike of highlights, but it's not touching the far right-hand side of that histogram down in the lower right-hand corner there. So that should be reasonably okay, but if I wanted to be extra sure, I could point my camera at the snow, make sure it's still not touching that far right-hand corner. And if I wanted to be really sure that we're not going to blow out these highlights, I could lower my ISO to ISO 400. So I'm going to do that and show you how it looks. Even something like here is a lot safer, and this is going to make sure that all of that snow has a lot of detail and texture in it. Journey is a little bit darker. You can't really see through the phone, but he is a tiny bit darker, but that's not something that's going to be difficult to fix in editing. Whereas if the snow was blown out, that's going to be a lot more difficult to fix in editing than just brightening a darker dog. So I'm going to take a photo at this exposure as well to show you guys the two different examples. So I've now changed lenses to the 50mm, which a lot of you guys might have. Have a look at my settings and look at the histogram. Again, if we're talking about making sure we don't blow out the highlights. So this is how they currently look, and I'm going to take an example of when the highlights get blown out in the snow so I can show you the difference. So my next tip is about hunting for locations. The good and the bad thing about the snow is that it kind of squashes all of your foreground. Most bushes and plants get really squashed, so you're left with kind of just a white open space without anything much going on, or you end up with a heap of sticks like this, which really are quite distracting and not that pretty. So it's worth looking for interesting things to give your photo a little bit of depth, so a little bit of color, a little bit of light, but be really careful of things like super sticky sticks because they are really detailed, really sticky, and not that pretty. Something like this little red tree behind Journey can work really well though, because it gives us a pop of color with the orange leaves and the green underneath, and gives us a bit of a frame on this side of our photo to block that edge of our photo and just give it a little bit of interest instead of it being plain white snow. Let's get Loki there and I'll show you an example. Good stop. Ha, Lolo, go back, back, back. Good, wait. So here's how he looks in this location. He's kind of sitting there, but you get the idea with the red branches. It's not the best example because it's kind of just sticking out of nowhere, but you can see how just that pop of color makes the photo way more interesting than if we were just looking over in this direction, for example. So here's just one more example of these red leaves. Look how pretty that looks in the background, contrasted with the snow. And if you have a red dog, orange dog, or a dog with amber eyes like Loki, this really helps it stand out and gives your photos a pop of color, which is always a great idea. Here's another quick example of using something interesting. Here we have these orange leaves going overhead. I'm just trying to get Loki to stand on the little stump that he's next to or in front of. Loki, can you go back a step? Back, stop, back, stop, up, stop. So as you can see, we get him framed on 3 sides, bit of color, bit of texture, and just by using a little overhanging branch. Okay, Lo, good. As always, if you're enjoying this video, make sure you like and subscribe because there's plenty more pet photography tips, tricks, how-tos, and behind the scenes coming your way. So obviously not all of you guys get snow, but we're going to be doing plenty more photo walks, behind the scenes location videos in the future for you guys. This is another great example of finding something interesting. We have a little pop of color, but we also have some fog rolling in the background, a bit of cloud, which is really cool. Everything's already really grey, but this is just adding an extra layer of cool mystery. And I've got Loki up on a stump there for just a little bit of extra something something. So this is a really cool spot. I don't know if it's because I'm Australian or what, but I love the snow. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like there's something so magical about the snow. Every time it snows, I will spend days taking photos. And, you know, even though they're pretty simple photos, they aren't my normal style, they're a little bit too open, you don't get to edit them quite as much. I still just love being out here. I love the way snow just transforms a really familiar forest into somewhere completely different. Like, it doesn't look like the same place that we come every other week. It looks like somewhere new and like a winter wonderland. So I love trying to capture that in my photos when it's snowing and just being able to show the different colors and textures and different way the light works when it's snowy. Wow, go on. And my last tip, and this is something that I advise even if I'm taking photos not in the snow, is to look for paths or little trails. But it works particularly well in snow because you get this really beautiful tunnel effect leading right back with kind of a lighter background. It frames your dog in the scene really beautifully, and it's super easy to find, and it's a little bit more interesting to use when there's snow compared to in normal situations because the snow gives it a bit of magic. I don't tend to take photos on roads or paths when it's not snowy because it's just a little bit open and boring, but in the snow it works really well. So behind me down there, you can see there is a tunnel kind of going back. So I'm going to pop Loki there because he's already there and take a photo in this tunnel, and you guys can see how it turns out. So here you can see Loki in position and the settings we're using and how nice and blurry that background is way back there. And here's how it looks from my perspective. It could even be more of a tunnel if it was more of a proper path, but I think it works quite nicely as well for us to get that really nice sort of blurry soft background way in the distance there. I've just put Journey in the same location, and I think you can see even better how that light background way in the distance compared to the darker sides really frames him nicely and just outlines him and kind of makes it look like he's on that glowing hazy background that people love, but it's all done in camera on location by using a tunnel. Okay, break! Yeah! One bonus tip or idea for an extra wintry feeling is to see if you can sprinkle a little bit of snow on your dog's face and then do a nice close head and shoulders photo like this example of Loki that I took. and it just gives you the real sense that they really are in amongst the snow, and you don't have to Photoshop snow overlays on top to have this feeling of falling snow, though you can if you want to, but it just makes it feel really authentic because it's like the dog's been romping around in the snow and has a face covered in snow, or that it's been snowing so much that they have that much snow on their face. So if they'll keep the snow on their face without shaking it off, and if they're happy for you to put snow on their face, that can be a really nice way to give them an extra wintry feeling. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that these tips and tricks have given you some new ideas to play with next time you get a nice bit of snow wherever you live. Make sure you've subscribed to the channel so that you can see us edit this photo of Loki from this before to this after, as I'm going to be putting up that tutorial really soon for you guys, and we're going to be going from start to finish. See you then.